Hi,
Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. I love your podcast. The
Oh,
people
thanks
I
so
heard from
much.
you.
Thanks so much. That really
Yeah.
means the world to me. That you have even ever listened. But thanks so much for coming. I know you're super busy.
Mm.
And I really am trying hard to not I have like 1 million questions that are like, is it my turn? Is it my turn? Is it my turn? So I'm just gonna try and have some like grounding things around me. I'm gonna just try and chill. But I do want to start with saying that this is a Heroes podcast. You are on a Heroes podcast. And you are sort of in some ways like my white whale, if that's what it's called. But my, I started sort of maybe like around always been interested in being interested, but in the last 6 or 7 years, I got really interested in the idea that if we found evidence of extraterrestrials, or not if, but when I find evidence of it and evidence of life after life post life, that would help me sort of gain secrets to the universe that I thought that was what I was longing for. And that sort of uh, began this trip that I am on. And so, yeah, as watching one of your movies, the Source Family documentary, completely changed my life so much. Was just like, yeah,
Oh,
just I mean, just incredible movie, incredible story, but just done so well. And I always was really impressed with the idea that, when we were kids, we would, like, if we wanted to know about the Rolling Stones, there was a few books, or we would share VHSs or whatever. Are you crying?
I'm crying. That was so sweet to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for making it. But yeah, there's just so um when I grew up, there was just books and videos and records and sharing it and sharing stories. And every documentary was just such a gift. And it meant someone had done so much work, so much passion, finding out, uh, finding and agreeing with themselves to follow it to the end, probably putting their lives in chaos and upheaval. But yeah, is that the Source Family um, is just something that I super love, but I would never have been able to, most people wouldn't have known about it. And I think it's super cool that, for people to make documentaries is my most favorite type of art. And so thank you so much for making that movie. And I'm just curious, how did you get started on that path of
Mm.
that particular telling that story and bringing it to the masses?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Bonnie, thank you so much. That really is very meaningful to hear that. That was definitely a very like long project that took a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do it. It really came about, oh gosh, I mean, it came about gradually because I learned about the Source family gradually. I didn't hear about them until 1999.
Okay.
And a friend of mine brought over this box set that Captain Tripp put out, this Japanese psych label. Um, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Jodi, you've got to see this. Have you seen this thing?" And he showed it to me, and it was this box set of this like white guru with like a long beard and a bunch of small people in his belly, and it just said God and hair on it. And I was like, "What is this?" And he said this was a group that lived in Los Angeles in the 70s, and they made these records. And I was shocked I'd never heard of them because I've been really like deep researching like radical spiritual communities, for like years before that. And there was really nothing online at the time. But I definitely like, and the box set was in Japanese, so I couldn't read anything.
Yeah.
But about 5 years later, I was with my then boyfriend, Adam Parfrey, who later became my husband, and he was at Amoeba Records just looking through the classical CD section. He loved classical music, and just right on top of that section was the student film on the Source family.
Wow.
And he was like, "Ooh, I bet Jodi would like this." And so he brought it home for me and we watched it, and I was just like blown away. It was definitely a student film,
Yeah.
but he had interviewed members of the Source family. And when I'd first looked at that box set, I just remembered in my mind, I was like, who is this creepy, cool cult? Like that was where my head was at in
Yeah.
1999.
Yeah.
When I listened to the interviews with these people, I was like, oh my God, these people are like really intelligent, like sophisticated, funny, have a sense of humor about themselves, like I want to meet these people. I want to get to know these people. And so I looked online again, and there happened to be a website that Isis Aquarian and Electricity
Yeah.
Aquarian had put together. And I reached out to her. She got back to me right away. And I said, and this is when Adam and I had Process Media, which was our publishing company, we put together in, I guess it was 2004. And I asked them if they'd ever considered doing a book, because immediately, I could just tell this would be an amazing book.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh, my brother Electricity and I have been working on one for 7 years and we just finished it. And so what I did was, and Adam and I would do this a lot with different, members of subcultures, especially who had documented the subculture they lived in personally,
Yeah.
is I started working with her and Electricity to like sort of radically reshape their book into a book that could be, sold to the public. And that included going through her archives and helping her organize it. And then we put the book out in 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, 7. So there is a book on this.
Yeah.
I don't know
No,
if you know about it, but
I do. Yeah. I would highly recommend that book in just as a cool book for sure. I remember when that book came out, and I was living in New York, and everyone was just like, you don't know about this, but you're from LA. And I was just like, I don't know everything like about everything, but I did, because it is something that most people know a part of, whether it's from like the Woody Allen movie or from just some stories or Johnny Yoko or whatever it is. But it never had a name before. And I never, so that, thank you for that book. That book is so cool. And
yeah. And I'll tell you, so from there, like part of doing that book was Isis took me on a trip to meet a number of Source family members, and I documented them. So I was just recording them at the time for interviews, because I was helping her sort of rewrite, the book. And just like the deeper I got meeting these people, I was just like, oh my God, like this is so incredible. And these people are such like wonderful, like just fascinating, rich, like human beings, and then Isis told me that she had 4 hours of home movies. And I started learning about how Isis came upon how she started creating the archive. And was just like, this has to be a film,
yeah,
really because of Isis. I mean,
yeah,
Isis, we wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for Isis and her tenacity, as the documentarian, the historian for the family, and for the, as the person who took a lot of photographs, supervised the taking of photographs, kept everything when the family was going through like the wildest
yeah.
challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like, I guess it could be answered for you too, but I've always been someone that's had a camera at my side, like when it was a big camera or film camera, real camera, like just 35 millimeter, just could not be comfortable without it. But it wasn't, I didn't know why. I think my personal belief is that it's a past life thing of, I'm not sure exactly what, and no, I haven't asked anyone, but I do know that now it's very normal to document stuff. But yeah, like 20 or 25 years ago when I started, it wasn't, and it was very inconvenient and uncomfortable. And I wonder for her, if you happen to know if it was yeah, that thing that's just like, that's your, like, because it's almost a compulsion for me to document almost. I don't, maybe I don't want to be involved because I'm too shy, or is she more documented because she knew it was going to be used later? Do you have a feel on that?
Oh my gosh, Bonnie, I feel like we should get Isis on here.
I'm down. Yeah.
I mean, we could, if you wanted to interview her, by the way, we could just like redo this interview and bring in Isis, but it's up to you. You can cut this part out if you want to, but
Yeah, I mean, I also am like, yes, we should bring her back another time. And also I think just to even talk about your current movie,
oh, great,
I
great.
could ask you forever. So we can come
Okay,
back if
cool.
you're
Very
okay
cool.
with that.
Gosh, yeah. No, I'm super happy to just be here chatting with you about it. But I'll tell you, so Isis, she came from, well, first, let me just say that is commendable that you took photos back then, because most younger people can't even understand like how inconvenient it was to like carry a camera around, have to load film into it, develop the film. I was a professional photographer, back in like the 90s. I shot a lot of rock bands and things like
Yeah.
that. And it was, it's a whole process. Like you have to really want to do it. And those
Yeah.
precious documents now, because they won't corrupt in the way that digital files, can. But with Isis, her father was chief of documentations for the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
He was,
Okay.
yeah, he was like military intelligence. He
Oh,
was
wow.
a master documentarian and archivist who managed a massive archive. And so
Wow.
Isis told me that she grew up being constantly documented by her dad. So he was always
Oh,
taking pictures. She was taking pictures at an early age. And so taking photographs, being in photographs, and then organizing the archive was just a natural thing for her. So
wow.
we're incredibly lucky,
How lucky. Yeah.
she had that background and that she wanted to do it, because
Yeah.
so much sacrifice for her to do that.
Yeah. And is that a feeling you have of like, um, I don't want to say that it has to be one or the other, but like, do you find yourself more comfortable following a story, being the story, or do you need to follow a story, or, like, are you, can you tell me where you are on that spectrum?
That's a really good question. I mean, I do find myself taking quite a few pictures, but when I started hanging out with Isis, um and I took a lot of pictures like in the 90s, and
Yeah.
it's like when I had the really fancy gear, I was documenting a lot of spiritual groups back then. So I had the bug, early.
Yeah.
I had the bug when I was like in college visiting a lot of outsider artists down
Yeah.
south, in the Southeast. I used to go visit Howard Finster, who was way into UFOs too.
Yeah.
But when I
Are
was Isis, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a documentarian.
yeah.
It's a pretender compared to her.
No
Like
way. Are you
always doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, many times it says in the it says about her that she was ferocious with it, which I think is a wonderful quality of a documentarian. But I guess in what I didn't, that's the thing why I could never make a documentary is like I just to even talk to you now, I went down so many interesting avenues and alleys and was like, should I find out like how the book did versus like, is there a question there that would lead to, just like how does society, how important to society, there's just so many different things. But I guess all I can do is ask you is, where are you from, and like what got you interested in and I don't really know what it at this point is called, like alternative spirituality. I just don't know, because I just always thought it was I didn't grow up Christian. So I think when you grow up outside of that, it's all just the same. It all seems kind of, it doesn't hold the weight, I think, if you grew up with like with a Christian background. But
That's interesting. What was your background? Did you grow up with like any spirituality at all? Or
yeah,
where did you grow up?
well, okay, but then you have to answer. But I grew up here in Los Angeles, and what's funny is
Right.
my family for 4 generations has run a restaurant. So and that restaurant is Canner's, which is
What?
Jewish.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Yeah. I'm not,
So cool.
yeah. So I've heard from my grandma, and I've heard in the past about this hippie restaurant, that, used to be over there. And, yeah. And it's just funny. And just hearing about organic food, talking about that restaurant as like this, like, oh, clean, small, clean vegetarian, or although, vegetarian based or vegetable heavy food, just versus the other restaurant. It's just a very funny, I guess I have a funny perspective on it, where it's so wild, but not as wild as, like, if I grew up, I think, Christian, where it's like, it seems like so it's not opposite to me. It's just the dream kind of situation is like healthy food, healthy hearts, like healthy minds. We're all connected. But yeah, where did you grow up, and how did you get into this cool stuff?
That is like just wild to hear. And I have
Yeah.
to tell you that I've had multiple Source family members tell me they loved going to Cantor's
Oh, cool.
back in the day. And like, I remember Dawn Hurwitz, she's a writer. She's actually writing her memoir about living in the Source family now.
Oh, cool.
When she came to Los Angeles a few years back, she wanted to meet at Cantor's. She was like, my favorite restaurant,
That's
Cantor's.
so cool.
But I grew up in Ohio, so I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in a Christian family, like a very Christian family. And when I say very Christian, I guess what I mean is that it was a moderate Christian family, so and a loving Christian family. But like, our life really surrounded the church. Like, we went to church every single Sunday from when I was born until when I was 18, unless we were out of town. And then my mom was like the choir teacher. My dad was in the Luther League. So we were like, it was a very religious, in some ways, upbringing, but also moderate. So I was not damaged by it. It was actually like, what I was able to learn was, for me personally, was that there were a lot of kind people,
Cool.
in that church. There wasn't the judgment that, people from outside. What I found was, like, when I got older, and came out to like Los Angeles, after college and stuff, and met a lot of people who didn't have any like spiritual upbringing. They thought all Christians were evangelical Christians.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what I understand is that most of America are these sort of quiet Christians. Maybe that things have changed, a little bit in recent years, but there's still like these huge pockets of just like kind, nice, mild mannered people who love community and love, great things that are greater than themselves. They're in
Totally.
the mystery and just, being decent people. At the same time, I was like a total hellion and like not like church, and was like not really, and was just, a troublemaker from day one, and grew up in a very like sheltered, very white, middle-class suburban environment, and was like, I was like ready to, explore under every single rock, in town, and go as far as I could, when I did. So that's the thing, like, Christianity to me, I got to immerse myself in it, but it just wasn't quite enough for me. Like, I needed something more. I needed more intensity, more of a direct experience thing. But I was always into, like, from a very young age in the library, I read all the books on witchcraft, all the books on the supernatural and the occult. And so I just had that, thing from a very, very young age, that was my path, so that's sort of how I got into that kind of material. But I guess my perspective on it is a little bit different because of my upbringing.
Right.
Like when I go visit, radical spiritual communities, or just like alternative groups like that, especially groups like Unarius, who I'm doing my new feature film on.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. There's like nothing, I cannot be more excited for anything to happen on earth, honestly. That it would be like my like first choice. If I found a genie lamp, it would be to see that movie. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't feel like that has been, I don't feel, first of all, nobody really knows about it. I know it's gonna like knows about them. I know that it's everybody's favorite topic. I know that whenever anybody finds out about them, they're like stunned, speechless. And I don't think, no offense to the what has been done so far, but I don't think it has it needs you, it needs you, and I can't wait to see it. Thank you so much.
Gosh, that's so exciting to hear. Thank you. I'm so
Yeah.
glad. I mean, that's how I felt, when I first encountered Unarius, in the 90s. When I
Yeah.
was like, just a big stoner watching their stuff on public access in my
Yeah.
rock and roll like lifestyle, back then. And all, like, so many of my friends were like collecting their tapes, and we're just like, oh my God, like, what is this?
Yeah.
What was really wild was back then I was just like kind of a wild, rock and roll photographer, and I wasn't really deep into spirituality at all. In fact, I was exploring transgressive culture, like in a big way, So like I went from being in, growing up in this wholesome Midwestern, like church
Yeah.
going protected scenario into Los Angeles and just diving deep into like all of the craziest stuff I could find, and
Yeah.
hanging out with Satanists, and marrying the Prince of Darkness, who was publishing books on black metal and serial killers, because I just wanted to explore. I didn't get a chance to see any of that in my earlier life, but with Unarians, what was so amazing was that like I had a certain understanding of them then, and then as years went on and I started getting really interested because of some wild personal experiences that led me to realize that, like, magic is real.
Yeah.
There are other dimensions that affect us deeply, whether we believe in them or not, and
Yeah.
other beings in other dimensions. And it took me like a 20-year journey, which included
As
this.
it should. I don't
Yeah,
think it's not supposed to.
or more. I'm still on the
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So much every day. Like over the last couple of years, I've just, reconfigured my brain in so many ways. But
Good.
but anyway, like 20 years, especially after meeting people like the Source family members who have been on a spiritual, really, so many of the Source family members have been on a committed spiritual path of their own making. Like that's what I really appreciate about them. They're just such independent thinkers, but they all, by and large, have really maintained the essence of what, of the tools that they were given by Father Yod, Jim Baker, and have learned a lot about navigating that world, of
Yeah.
spirituality. And coming back to Unarius, 20 years later, I have a whole different take on them. And especially, I have to say, like, I feel like it's been an enormous gift, but also an enormous responsibility to tell their story,
Right.
because they've just been mocked for so many years and, not taken seriously. They've been sort of branded as kooks, by like
Right.
90s transgressive subculture, those writers. And I was telling the artist Jim Shaw, when I first met him, we were talking about Unarius. He's a big fan, and I was just like, I have to say, the deeper I go, the saner they become.
Totally. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
more I learn, the more I am like in awe of the complexity and sophistication of Ernest Norman's writings, the founder of Unarius, his channelings, what Ruth Norman was doing, and just like her courage and decency, ultimately, trying to help people.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. I think also society, although it's so hard to say in this bubble of Los Angeles, but like, I mean, I don't really know how it works, but it feels like the pendulum is swinging, where that is exactly what you make fun of in the 80s. Like, let's be honest, like you make fun of people that think differently, you make fun of people that look different, make fun of people that don't look the same. You make like even it was normal to make fun of a girl that looks manly. It was normal to make fun of a man that looks girly. That was like that was the way it was. And like when that's changing and sexuality and sort of gender identity is changing, which I know it is. And it's those things aren't to be like, they're not a spectacle to be laughed at. There's something to be respected and like admired. And I feel like that really is changing, so that as much as I can imagine looking at that from the vantage point of someone like 20 years ago and being like, haha, that's so funny.
Right.
Uriel, what's that? Or like, look at those
Right.
costumes. It's like, no, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. And I think, yeah, there's a pendulum that's swinging towards that, and swinging towards like personal freedom, personal identity. And in a weird way, like after touring around the country, it's like people might not be all doing yoga right now and buying crystals right now for the most best, purest, like awesomest reason, but it is something that's happening. And it like you could like lift your nose or pick your nose, I don't whatever it is you do to look down your nose at people. It's like
Oh,
it's
right.
like there is people doing breath work, whether or not they're doing it for good or bad or whatever reasons. There's people getting in touch with their bodies. There's people
Yeah.
being exposed to these things. And there's people that are learning that like love and light is like a thing. And whether or not that's in this weird, evil kind of way or not, it still is happening. And I think people are ready to not make fun of things that are different than them. I think they're ready to learn and be blown away and like, yeah, and just find it to be, because it did, those concepts don't seem, because I was just looking, there are many UFO religions, many extraterrestrial channeled, I just use religion because don't know what other, but there's so many. I don't know how many religions there are in total, but I was just looking, there's like about 30 of those. And I think it's all just kind of language. So, it's just the way that we have to use words to communicate. But are they channeling a specific group of beings?
Yeah. Well, first I want to speak to what you just said about, people right now and these sort of trends where you've got a lot of younger people who are identifying as witches now, and you've got a lot of people who are trying these modalities that are new to them that they haven't necessarily explored, people of all ages,
Yeah.
and what I love about that is I feel like just from the research that I've done on these spiritual groups throughout, the 20th century, the 19th century, and beyond, is that these groups are largely metaphysical in nature. So they're different from other religions.
Okay.
They're always going to be more on the marginalized side of things, because we've got a Judeo-Christian culture in America, so we have this really dominant culture that's based on Judeo-Christian ideas that involve God, a certain idea of God, and then Jesus, and these things that really impact a lot of our culture. But throughout American history, especially, and our founding fathers, of course, were all occultists,
Yeah.
a lot of them were Freemasons and metaphysicians. And throughout times of rapid change, these groups sort of like rise up. I mean, a lot of scholars would say they've always been in existence, but I find that there are like bubbles that sort of rise in popularity during times when we have like serious economic disparity.
Okay.
We've got like depressed economy, we've got polarization in politics, we have larger levels of like distrust of institutions happening,
Right.
which usually happens when those institutions have become very corrupted.
Yeah. Well,
And so
that's interesting.
it
Yeah.
is, right? And so what happens is like these metaphysical communities, and there are so many of them that have existed in American culture, from, all the way back to like, people landing on Plymouth Rock and, starting to come to the country, these alternative spiritual communities, I should say. But they spring up and they provide what they provide, I think, is they provide these sort of like micro communities for people who feel alienated from the larger culture and who are not getting what they need from the larger culture. Like right now, people who are
Right.
not getting what they need from the version of consumer culture, late capitalist culture that is sort of dominating like the media and everything else right now. And so they provide that and allow opportunities for healing, so when people are
Yeah.
in pain, people are suffering, these groups provide these different modalities and a structure for people to heal, if it's whether it's crystals or breath work or past life psychodramas, like
Yeah. Well,
doing.
I just wonder, is this, I don't know, phenomenon, because I think it's phenomenal. Is this phenomenon like, I know it happens everywhere, but is it predominantly happening in America right now?
Oh, that's a really good question because my focus has been on
Okay.
America and American groups, but I do know that, this also ties into intentional communities. Like my interest personally,
Yeah.
not only like alternative spiritual communities, but they're intentional communities, communal experiments, spiritual communities that live together or live on the same land. And those exist all over the world. And they
Yeah.
have, and I did a book through Process called The Modern Utopian back in like 2008, which was a compendium of these magazines that this amazing guy, Richard Fairfield, edited and put together back in the 70s of intentional communities. And they weren't all spiritual. Some of them were science communes, some were like craft
Yeah.
communes, whatever. But he also did like an issue in Japan, an issue in Europe. Like they seem to exist,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've thought of this before, but it's just like a band is so similar to that. It's like you have some sort of ideology that you invented. You take little pieces from, I don't know, Bo Diddley, Stones, whatever. You take little pieces from other things, but then you have a mantra in some words, and then you go around trying to like share the good word. And yeah, you do. It's just so, I've always just found it to be very similar, sort of, in that it's all, yeah, it's just, these are beliefs that you share and you live your life for them. And it's not like about you know like hoping to, like, yeah, I think a lot of people think bands are this thing that's like hoping to get like some sort of money and then you stop doing it, but it's like, no, but going on tour is the goal, like doing the show, meeting the people, trading beliefs, like becoming spiritual, or just growing spiritually. But I guess one thing I was curious about America is that particularly now, is that there's such a lack of trust in healthcare, and in that it seems like people have to depend on others, and it seems like that would make more communal living and more ideas not based on trusting the government sort of start to pop up now more than ever, just because it seems so clearly for profit. And I think, yeah, when enough people see like, oh, this system is not good, it would make them really not want to be part of it.
Well, yeah, I totally see that too, and agree that it seems like a lot of people are really, starting to question things on a deep level. And what's really interesting, the Source family is a great example, not the only by a long shot, but a great example of an intentional community that sprung up, in the late 60s or early 70s, I should say, and was led by someone with like a deep interest in holistic healing, healthy eating. And it was a group that was, you know, that was doing things that were illegal at the time, like breastfeeding in public, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
Natural births, you know, home births were illegal back then. And so, you know, Jim Baker, there was a doula in the family, and then Jim Baker also wanted to deliver these, you know, children, as we saw in the film.
So cool.
But he was, you know, he had a deep background. You know, Los Angeles, Southern California is also so rich in alternative healing modalities, like ever since, you know, people came out to heal from the Midwest, like in the late 1800s. And then in the early 1900s had all these like raw restaurants and things like that. But, you know, Jim Baker had a lot of friends like the Nature Boys, who were, you know, eating raw food and, you know, fruits and nuts, and like living in caves, and, you know, back in the 40s.
So
And
cool.
yeah, and so with the Source family, you know, they were controversial, very controversial at the time, because, you know, at the time women were having babies in the hospital, most of them were drugged, you know, when they were having their babies. Women were feeding their babies formula, you know, back then. Breastfeeding
Yeah.
was very looked down upon, and the nutritional benefits were rarely discussed. But that
Yeah.
was a major topic of discussion in the Source family. So what you know, and they had 54 live births
It's
in the Source
crazy.
family,
Yeah.
and which is totally amazing, and then ate all natural food. So yeah, I would say like some of these groups, you know, not all, but some of these groups definitely allow, they're sort of like cultural incubators, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I
Yeah.
find, which is so exciting, because you have these, you know, leaders like Uriel, Ruth Norman from Unarius. She was just like a wildly idealistic visionary. These are like way showers, you know? So like
Yeah.
for people who feel like the larger culture, like the dominant culture, especially when things are in decline, you know, we go through
Yeah.
cycles, right? Of like, you know, growth, peak, decline, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
see, it's cyclical. And, you know, back in the early 70s, we were in a cycle of decline, industrialized food, industrialized medicine. A lot of people were questioning that and wanted to start doing their own thing. And that led, of course, to like the mind, body, spirit movement. It actually led to these major movements, which is why Whole Foods exists, you know, like the
Yeah.
guy who started that was like, like living in a vegetarian, you know, he was living in an intentional community as well for a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ruth Norman too, just these ideas, they offer like positive visions and structure and practices for people who want it to heal, you know?
Yeah. I think that's there's a really good quote about that in the Source Family scrapbook, which I did. I don't know if you still can, but people were giving money to fund it or something.
Oh, no, Sacred Bones is publishing it. I mean,
Oh, okay. I think I gave money before to
well, they
Sacred Bones.
started it that, yes, they started it
Okay.
that way, but it was just to, you know, market it. And
Yes.
it's
Sacred
actually,
Bones rules. That's
yeah, you
awesome.
like those guys? They've been
Yeah.
dream partners. I just
Yeah.
love Caleb and Carrie, and they've been so wonderful. So yeah, it's on sale. You can get it anywhere.
Well, yeah, it looks amazing. But I was reading what you sent me, and there was a quote that something, and I can't remember who, because I
Omni,
don't,
I bet it was Omni the Aquarian.
maybe, but something about when you want to change, you don't change society, like you change.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah, what's that quote again?
Oh yeah, let's read that for people.
Okay. Yeah.
Such a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta pull it up here.
Sorry, I didn't do good notes. I do have one note question for you later.
Yeah, you bet. Let me see if I can pull it up here, because I was taking a look at that. Oh yeah, here we go. Let's see. Buckminster Fuller. Futuristic visionary Buckminster Fuller famously declared, You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, make the existing model obsolete.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing, like, as I said in the essay, like hundreds of thousands of people, back in the late 60s and early 70s were doing that. They went for it, they left home, they lived together, because there was also like, really challenging economic times there.
Yeah.
People realized they could have more freedom if they lived together, and they had these cultural incubators, and some of the most progressive ideas that are in our culture now came from that time. And my hope and
Totally.
prayer is we're headed for another one of those times, but it's going to be even more expanded, more expansive.
I think we are. I can feel it in I can feel it just because I can feel it, but also like after the last 2 years, I think everyone had an opportunity to process, and everyone had an opportunity to learn, and I think many people did learn. And while some,
Yeah,
what's that?
you do, huh? I love that you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, on our since we've toured, like the people I've seen come out and what they've had to say, and see them express themselves in their new ways, the ways they've been waiting a year to show who they truly are and what it means to be them, and see such a self-expression in a different way, in a true way. I mean, it was like made me almost cry every night. It was so sweet, and so many young people, and just like way different than before. And it was interesting is that I don't really I don't get entertained. Like I really feel comfortable as an entertainer. I like that position. I like to be in front of, or I like to be at a event as like waiting to entertain. I don't really like just sitting around like waiting, whatever. But
Yeah, I know what you mean.
people want entertainment. They want to taste life, feel life in a different way than before. Before it seemed like something, it was just lackluster, and it was. And I think that people have had an opportunity to like really do a lot of thinking, a lot of healing. And I think for a lot of people, it was very it was traumatic. I know that people don't like to admit things like that, but it was traumatic. It was every day the news was traumatic. It was really bad. And sometimes you can't get in touch with yourself until I don't know why, it might be evolutionarily, but till you feel trauma in your body, you're not sensitive. And that always makes people heal. And I think that that's happened to a majority of people, whether or not they're fully aware of it yet or not. Like a lot of empaths or psychics or stuff, it starts with trauma, because it makes your awareness of beyond you, you become hyper aware of what's beyond you, what are the possibilities, what are the potentialities, and then whatever else. And so I think a lot of people, even not to particularly men, I think didn't really have this idea of this like awareness of what was around them until they were alone with their own energy, not feeling anybody else's energy, just had their own energy. And then all of a sudden went out in the world and was like, what is this? And it's like, everybody has energy, everybody's giving it off. When you're in a shitty mood, it bing, 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 bing. And I think I just noticed people noticing this for the first time. And I think it's, yeah, that's just my opinion though, but I feel like there's something is happening, and I feel like it's a energetic awareness that what we do does matter, and at the same time it doesn't matter. But it's all these things. Like I just, people know what vibes are. People seem to be, I mean, there's still knuckleheads, obviously there's still as many knuckleheads as before, but I can tell that people, yeah, all of these words they never thought of. Healing, like, is that chicken soup? It's like, no, like you're healing. And yeah, I just hear these words all the time, every day.
That makes me so excited. I love that you got to go out. I mean, that must have felt so good to just get out, after. like
Well,
see people and get to, you know, I mean, being in a band and being like a singer in a band, like I find a lot of singers to have like shamanic qualities, even if they don't know it, you know, there's something what you're kind of like initiating people into an experience where you're all really coming together and sharing this energy together, you know, and you can do what you want with it. But I love that you're picking up people who are really, it sounds like people are finding more like authentic versions of themselves because maybe they've had time to reflect, be with themselves, get out of that rat race of like, oh, I've got to go here, I've got to go there, I got to do this, you know, I got to be this. And then there's something about like that idea of the heartbreaking, you know, like
yeah,
sometimes it takes having your heart broken to open it up, you know, and be able
yeah,
to feel and just experience emotions and allow love in, you know, like I feel like a
that's
lot of people have had their hearts broken over and over again the last couple of years.
yeah. Totally. And sometimes you're too busy to feel. Like that's how I felt. I was just too busy to feel, didn't have time for it, not enough space, gotta go, gotta go. And then it stopped. And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, going on tour is interesting now because I don't drink anymore. So I have to create like an ecstatic state, which is really fun. And I never knew anything about that before, how to like fully like not channel energy, but like suck it, like, yeah, just I guess channel it through each
Through you.
other. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really weird. It's really cool. It feels like every time before I play, I'm like, okay, this is like a marathon. Like either I succeed or I fail. But before it was like super easy. I just drink and I had energy. But yeah, I feel like bands are a lot like that. You're really, at least I'm trying to make sure every single person is like feel in the audience, like feel seen and heard and you know, and loved, which is
Oh,
funny.
that's so nice.
But yeah, I want to ask you one question is I don't know if this is like a favorite your quote or your line or something, but you say it's got to have soul.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's that?
That's actually a quote from a Robert Downey Sr. movie. Um,
Okay.
and it's Putney Swope. I don't know if you've ever like seen this film, but it's like an incredible film that he made that was a critique of the advertising agency
Oh,
that
cool.
was a character who was like, it's gotta have soul, like this amazing character. And that's how I feel. Like that's what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to like getting to the essence, you know,
Yeah.
of a person or a movement or a subculture. And I
Yeah.
feel that we all have souls, you know. I feel that the idea of recognizing that we're more than just this body is it's like it's what gets me up in the morning. It's like the mystery of life, you know, a sense of
Yeah.
wonder for what I don't know, you know, and what feels good and fulfilling.
Yeah.
That's another thing about the last couple of years. Like for me, it's so interesting. I feel like I've become even more sensitive as well. And I'm really sensitive to how different culture affects me. Like we were just
Okay.
watching Cabaret a couple
Yeah.
ago, you know, with Liza Minnelli, which is
Yeah.
Weimar Germany. And
Yeah.
you know, that's something that like I hadn't seen it since like the late 90s, you know, when I loved it. And seeing it now, I was just like, oh, this is like way too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
identify with her. I don't identify, you know, like I don't identify with the Nazis. Like I like this is like I feel like we are in this potentially like Weimar era period in America right
Yeah.
now, and I don't want to participate in either side.
Right.
I want to like focus on ideas of like healing and regeneration. And for me, that's just the stuff that I'm most passionate about right now. And that's after like really going, I feel like I've like experienced so much, you know, over the last 20 years, like going to the depths of like really dark culture, and, you know, getting
Yeah.
a lot of those people and just like looking at it, you know, in the bottom of that box and just being like, oh, is that all there is? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No,
want more than that. I want love, you know, I
yeah.
want ecstatic states without drugs.
Yeah, totally.
It's
Well,
like Unarius teaches you how to access. The Source family, you know, taught people how to access. That's the beauty of these metaphysical communities, is they initiate people into peak experiences without drugs, largely. Although the Source family did do 6 seconds of the sacred herb for their morning meditations, but you know, they recuperated a lot of junkies, and you know,
yeah,
alcohol.
no, I think that that's amazing. I think that that's so cool because it is like, um, people, you know, people don't want to do certain things because they think it costs too much money, but it's like you're costing too, it costs you too much money to not do it. And yeah, I think that's so super cool. I guess, yeah, I have too many more million questions. Maybe if it's okay, either you can come back with ISIS, or if you want to, I'd love to talk to you more about uh the, like how you met the Unarians and stuff like that. But not my phone, my computer only does it for an hour. So
Yeah, yeah.
is there anything you would like, or what would you like to say to the people and the entities, and everyone else?
Well, I would like to say that I support the vision of these unusual way showers throughout human history, who in the face of very dark and challenging times insist that we are on the verge of a breakthrough, you know, in human consciousness and in society, and that that we are looking heavily at our societal shadow right now, but we're on the verge of something really good, and it involves just a complete transformation, you know. And so I just want to honor those people who came before us with those like unrepentantly idealistic visions, you know, of
Yeah.
humanity that, you know, they always fall short. I mean, the Space Brothers, you know, the UFOs never landed. So, you know, Father Yod had his idea for their Aquarian, you know, prophecy. But, you know, they don't, those ultimate prophecies don't have to happen for people to be able to have like incredible healing journeys and transformational journeys and get to experience like the mystery, you know,
Yeah.
of the universe in a profound way. And I have a lot of respect for those people who are just as human as the rest of us, you know, and the group members, especially the people who are part of these communities. You know, I respect their courage and their idealism and their love.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And I should say the Source Family Scrapbook, the Source Family Scrapbook, we're publishing it with Sacred Bones. It is officially out in stores by November 22nd, but I think you can
Wow.
order it now. And maybe, you know, next time we either talk with ISIS, or we can, you know, talk about Unarius when the time is right. My feature documentary on Unarius is almost finished.
Okay.
Probably come out somewhere next year.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah,
That was so cool. Can I ask you one more question real quick? Is that okay?
of course. Yeah.
I'm just curious, when you for me, I've found, you've done some of their past life lesson stuff, the Unarian, if you feel okay talking about it, is I've noticed that most of the past life information I've had is so obvious. Like I can send you our new record, but basically we made a new record based entirely on the idea that I was told that I was a jazz singer in a previous life, and I realized that if I knew my name, I could listen to myself. So we decided to make this record for our future self. And I'll send it to you here, but it's just like, yeah, there's just so many things. Just making a whole record about that, the parallels of like my obsession with Egypt, my obsession with this, my obsession with that is just like comes straight from somewhere. Have you had similar, have you been able to look into any past life stuff?
Yeah, I mean, before Unarius, like definitely, but and
Yeah.
continuously. And I find that, some people, there's always the issue of getting a little too caught up in your past lives, and
Right.
lose your ego and, like, oh, I was this, I was that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think like when the past lives can become something to help you understand yourself on a
Yeah.
deep, especially like issues you may have that you need to work through,
Yeah.
help you just love yourself a little bit more, not be so hard on yourself and be like, oh, I was doing that like 2 lifetimes ago or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like that can be a beautiful philosophy if you want to even
Yeah.
philosophy to help you, live a deeper existence and also connect with people on deeper levels. Like there are certain people I meet and I'm like, I know you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like I know we've met each other before.
Yeah.
It's a way of establishing kinship, which I think is really nice during this time, as well. But
Yeah.
I want to come back and ask you a bunch of questions, Bonnie. 'Cause
Okay. So let's stop
yeah.
this. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
coming here.
much. All right.
Okay. Bye.